born in Clarendon, Jamaica, and by the age of 11, you migrated to the UK. And then in your early 20s, you were in and out of prison. So, please just tell us about your early life and growing up and the challenges you faced.
It was a time of discovery, not just for myself, but also for a whole generation of people. Because my parents, who were the generations of the Windrush, had only just arrived, you know, maybe 10 years or so before myself. Most people. In the 60s, I arrived 1969, um, just as the moon landing was going on. I landed as well. Yes, and my parents were just about learning to be in this own new country. Because the key thing for those people who I see as the greatest entrepreneur that us as Black people has ever send out to the world were the people of that generation that was coming to a new world, didn't know that they were going where they were going. There was no internet or anything like that. It was just a dream that they wanted to work as hard as they can to send for their kids one at a time to give them an education. That was it. And of course, I was one of these children. I was the youngest of my family, which it took me a bit of a time to come over because in those days, I suppose the science was to send for the elder kids first, and I think it was like that for most families in the Caribbean, so they can educate themselves in school and then maybe to get a job quicker, and then to help the family as well with work, 'cause that's what it was back then. But the smaller child wasn't really thought about that back then until his time was to come. So unfortunately, or fortunately for me, because it was the time I got to spend with my grandma, while my family was here trying to build a home, and some of my other brothers and sisters were coming over before myself. So I got that time to spend with this wonderful woman who knew that I perhaps needed a little bit more attention than others. I was a bit wayward as a young boy, was running around as a 5-year-old boy. It is, the story of me in Clarendon is legendary as a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old boy running around in the community, this very small sugarcane community in Jamaica. And eventually my time came when I had to sort of, pull myself away from this beautiful woman that was teaching me about food and about the natural world and all the things she knew as a, as a woman, back then she was in her perhaps in her 40s or 50s when I left Jamaica. So she didn't have much education herself, but she knew about food. She knew how to cook. She knew how to tell me about life, and she knew music because she was a fantastic singer in the Baptist church. So she sort of harmed me with everything that she knew, which was the important things of life as a young boy then, coming to a whole new country and you're 10 years old, and she equipped me with these great things. And eventually I came over and struggled a lot to fit in. Like I said, just as my parents were struggling to get a job, and with all the racism that was going on back then, it was no dogs, no blacks, no Irish, that type of thing. Very difficult to get jobs, to get work. So they were facing their own problems. But as kids, so were we, because we had to be running away from skinheads, and racism was a thing now that I'd never experienced as a kid growing up. I didn't know about it in Jamaica. It wasn't there. And all of a sudden you're just dropped in this place where, some skinhead white guys is chasing you down, trying to rip your head off, and you're only a school kid just arrived from the Caribbean. And you're thinking, what? Where's this from? And you have to protect yourself against that. So it was a very much a learning curve, a discovering a whole new world. Unlike my kids now, who they leave school and get on to college, and all they have to face is just the system. There isn't your neighbor or the guy down the road who's chasing you, trying to rip your head off, which was just like back then. So it's very difficult for me growing up back then. So went through a lot of problems, as you mentioned then, prisons and going at Her Majesty's pleasure and having to find myself while I'm there. So even though I may look down at that part of my life, I perhaps have been the worst, and I wouldn't recommend that for anybody to go through those things, to be able to end up in those places. But for me personally, that's where my salvation came. That's where my awakening came to say, okay, you've got to wake up from where you are. This is not what your grandmother sent you over to do. But you need to wake up and find the true you, the real you, because that's not you in prison really there. That's the kind of vibe that I was getting when I ended up in those places. And I really wanted to change. I wanted to do it while I was there.